when we start to really analyze ourselves and break ourselves open and unpack and see where we can fit into more than just one community, that's where true happiness really can be found. Because if you stay in one community where everyone is the same, who thinks the same and who dresses the same and who has the same kinds of political beliefs and the same kinds of struggles, then you are actually limiting yourself.
It's the end of season 3, y'all. Makes me sad. I could do this truly all day, every day. We're not done yet, though. There's one more episode. Our season 3 finale is with Brandon Kazen-Maddox. They are an American Sign Language artist, director, choreographer, dancer, filmmaker. They are also co-founder of Up Until Now Collective, a New York City-based artist collective doing some really important work, not just for the artist community, but for all of us. So I want you to listen to this episode with an ear for, is this who's missing and what's missing from my organization, from my group of friends? How can I support? We talk all about how to find your place in this world, something I think I know I yearn for. Brandon is so smart and inspiring, and they gave me so much to reflect on. You're gonna learn a lot. You're gonna feel good. Get ready. I'm Emily Drake, and this is Who's Missing. Hi, friend.
Hi.
What did I interrupt the middle of? It sounded like you were talking about where you're living these days. Your lighting's fantastic, by the way. You did
Good.
it.
Thank you. This is all natural sunlight. So I'm like, let me just set up in the living room and, as you see, expose brick and plants. So
Check and check. I'm so happy to be laying eyes on you. You are, someone for people who are out there like, I couldn't possibly reach out to this person. I don't know them. I've never met them. Like, what would they have time for me for? I reached out to you because I saw you on TikTok. I
love that.
Do people reach out to you a lot?
Yeah, people do reach out to me often. I think my career, what I've done in my interpreting world and the performance world, it's been on many different platforms. So it's always nice now for people to reach out, and however they've seen me, there we are.
How have you managed the evolution of your identity in the public eye? What's that been like to have people? Yeah, tell us, because I think, what someone told me the other day? They're like, you're so brave for starting a podcast. And I was like, no. And they meant it from the place of putting yourself out there, being brave. So can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you?
Yeah, I feel really lucky to have my partner, Kevin. Kevin is his name sign. He has a 25-year career of working in the opera world, film, television, and really interfacing with stars, huge, high-level stars. And he used to be Courtney Love's kind of personal assistant on some work that they were doing. And he, at the beginning of our relationship, was like, you are amazing. Are you ready to be famous? Like, are you ready? Because it has a lot of caveats. It has a lot of things that you're going to have to accept and kind of work in to yourself and adjust yourself for your new life. So are you ready? And I was like, yeah, I'm ready. And it has been a journey. And I mean, I was not as ready as I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, we talk a lot on this podcast about the risks and rewards of trusting yourself. And I find the more people I talk to, there is risk, but there's really more reward than anything. How have you found that to be true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with all good, you have to accept bad or negative or not as great. There's always a balance. It's never going to be 100% perfect all the time. And I think the risk for me has to do with just being honest and vulnerable. Because I think number one, that's where I live my life. I'm transparent and honest, sometimes to like a fault. But I would prefer to have faults in the honesty realm of being too transparent than being anything else. So
Right.
I think that's kind of, for me, the risk is like just that real vulnerability. But the reward is kind of the same. It's like when I get to show that vulnerability, then it inspires other people to be more honest, be more analytical within themselves, and to put themselves forward in a way that maybe they didn't think about before they saw me do it.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the obvious for folks who are watching this episode. And for folks who are listening, our friend Brandon is signing using American Sign Language, which, by the way, because of you, I learned that there's nuances in American Sign Language depending on racial and cultural background, depending on gender identity, depending on sexual orientation. So I just want to mark that for everyone. Like, we know it's happening and it's very intentional. And would you mind just, sharing with us? I'll say this for our podcast, it's the first time we've done a video episode. Right. And it was the very obvious thing we would do, but tell us how you introduced that idea to us and why it matters.
Sure, definitely. So I am talking with my voice and signing with my hands at this moment. So my grandparents are deaf, and I grew up in a home where everyone used sign language. So my deaf grandparents, my mom, who's a CODA, child of deaf adults, my two aunts, and my uncle, who were all teenagers when I was born, everybody. And then I was born into this world where my hands think and my mind thinks in sign language, and my words kind of are along for the ride, I like to say. And so my words are really just kind of representing what concepts and memories and feelings that I have in sign language. And it's how I best express my full voice. There are times within the deaf community that some people say that you have to choose between either talking with your voice or signing with your hands and turning your voice off. American Sign Language has, 5 grammatical parameters that when you use all of them together, turning your voice off, that is a beautifully strong, full expression of American Sign Language. And at the same time, there are many people who talk and sign for their lives. There are hard of hearing people, there are deaf people who use their voice. And for me, it's personal expression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, I think there is probably, I want to go back to your social media presence, and I'm thinking about, and not just, let's stay with that. Your social media presence and how social media has played a role in, we're here to talk about finding your place. Right?
Definitely.
My experience with that, it can be, physical space, it can be mental space, emotional space. I want to explore how social media, for the communities that you're a part of, has helped you find your place?
Yeah, how social media has helped me find my place. So I started my journey with social media through YouTube, I think. I mean, back in San Francisco when I had started circus school, I studied Chinese acrobatics, and I started my life as a gymnast from age 4. So I've always tumbled. And so I remember my coach told me that he wanted me to think of an act. And I was like, okay, well, I got to think about all the different things that I love to do. I love to sign, to dance, to tumble, and I love music. So why don't I put them together and make an act? And so, the first thing that I did was I Won't Give Up by Jason Mraz. And we love that song. We love Jason Mraz so much. I've always been a fan. And so I did that. I took all of those things and signed this song and filmed myself and projected my signing interpretation behind me, and then wore the same clothes and did the performance live. And the deaf community hadn't seen that exact thing before, especially with tumbling and signing and dancing. And so that was the thing that and I put that on YouTube, and then I started making more videos of sign language and dance and tumbling on my own, self-producing. And then we had Facebook also, and Facebook groups. And so during the kind of growth of social media, I found different Facebook groups with deaf community members and, queer community members. And before BIPOC was a thing, Black queer groups and trans groups, and just those affinity, those interest groups that we so fell into in Facebook world. But then, Instagram happened, and this has been what a development of social media, right? And I would say that in 2021, 2022, I had to get a social media manager. Because social media was becoming something that if you want people to understand what you do in your world, that you have to really get it out there. But I will say that was not my favorite time period. I did not enjoy being a content creator for social media. That's not why I make my art. So it is a tool, social media, but it can be something that there's a rabbit hole that you can go deep down. And at this time, I've really kind of stepped away from it. But it has helped people find me and me stay current in what's happening in the world.
Yeah. Well, I think about, you've just gone through a move with Kevin. You have found yourself in a beautiful new dwelling that will over time become more and more of your own. And I'm very excited for you. I'm thinking about, you grew up in Vancouver, Washington, you live in New York City. Finding your place as you go through life has different flavors, right? For me, I feel like the first 20 years of my life were somewhat about conforming to place. It was like, oh, this is what the places are, these following things, and you fit in, right? Like and then in the in my 30s and 40s, it was like, that's true, and this doesn't work for me. So now I'm going to find something else, sort of stepping out. So I'm thinking for young people or people in general listening in a community, I think of New York City, I think of Chicago, but finding your place ain't so hard sometimes, right? Like there's a lot of options. So how do you, what would you say to someone who maybe doesn't have it when they walk out their front door? Is it a myth that it's easier in these places? Does social media facilitate it? What do you make of that?
I think that nothing can compare to real life, interpersonal relationship building and interaction.
Yeah.
I think the internet and social media are tools that can help us find our communities, plural. Some people feel like they belong to one community. Dancers, for example, with like a capital D, dancer, that is its own world. Singers, musical theater artists and performers, even communities like the disability community, blind folks or deaf people, or even gay men versus lesbians. Yes, these are all communities, but I think when we start to really analyze ourselves and break ourselves open and unpack and see where we can fit into more than just one community, that's where true happiness really can be found. Because if you stay in one community where everyone is the same, who thinks the same and who dresses the same and who has the same kinds of political beliefs and the same kinds of struggles, then you are actually limiting yourself to just the same kinds of ideas and concepts. It's when you put yourself in the same room physically with someone who has a disability, or someone who has a different ethnicity, someone who has a different preference in their lifestyle. And then you find the similarities and differences there. And then you really learn what you believe and where you can fit in the world. And that, contrary to some people's beliefs, we don't have just one place. We belong everywhere, really.
Ooh, I'm buzzing now. I want to stay with this thought about you belong everywhere, and speak to the person who's listening about maybe someone who is struggling to take a step toward freedom and how you find that freedom. I'm mindful, Brandon, that you've created spaces before. I'm reminded about the Up Until Now Collective, which you created at the beginning of the pandemic. You created a space that didn't exist before. So I'm wondering, that I'm kind of getting around to this question, how do you decide whether you need to create a space or find a space to be in?
That's a great one. I think there have been many times in my life where, as a Black person who has a white mom and a Black dad, I was not Black enough or not white enough for many spaces where I grew up. So there was no space for me to be. In the deaf community, I am not deaf. But I have deaf culture inside of me. That's how I was raised. My grandparents are deaf, not my mom or dad. So codas even some of them don't look at me as the same as them, even though we have similar experiences. So the deaf community and hard of hearing people are kind of out of place too. They're sort of straddling these different worlds. So that's a community that I have loved and am a part of, but at the same time, I can remove myself from it. So there's not exactly a space for me there either. When it comes to the gay and queer communities, we have safe spaces also. So if there are gay men being together to do things for gay men, or lesbians for the same thing, trans people, it's okay to have our safe spaces. Definitely. We need them to be able to fully express ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
But when those safe spaces become exclusionary and they never allow someone else who's an outsider to come in and learn and exchange information, that's when it becomes dangerous, in my opinion. So I think when you step out the door and you wonder, like, where can I go? what I've been doing lately is, signing up for different email listservs and of things that I'm interested in, films or different spaces, institutions, places that put on performances, and just letting them tell me what's up. And then I'll find whatever it is. I'll put it on my calendar and I'll go alone. I just watched, a film at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, last night, The Fabelmans. It was on the rooftop. Oh my gosh. An amazing film.
I've heard. I haven't seen it yet.
It's very long, but it is worth watching all of it. It's beautiful. But I met some amazing people that I loved enjoying a film with. And I think, and that's where you find community.
Yeah. That did that take practice for you to do that? Is that intuitively and instinctually who you are? I know I can conjure the image of like 4 or 5 people who would be like, that's my worst nightmare. Right? So like, how is that manifested to this place where you're like, yes, and then I'm going to do this? Or do you always have a little bit of fear maybe? I don't know.
Well, I want to go back to, you mentioned Up Until Now Collective.
Yes, please.
Up Until Now Collective. And we made that company. We founded that company. Kevin, our executive producer, Jecca Berry, and myself. And then Marcus Shields is our videographer, editor. The 4 of us, have experience in the opera world and in performance and music and dance and film and theater. In 2020, we saw the world crumbling before our eyes. We saw institutions that were rotten from the core, that were collapsing on themselves. And instead of thinking about changing the institution that is already on its way down, we thought, what better thing to do than to build something new whose core values are what we really stand for, And I think that's natural within the 4 of us, is recognizing what needs to change, recognizing what doesn't work for ourselves and for our friends and for our families and for our community, for our world in a macro and a micro level. That's a natural thing that the 4 of us share. But again, I think going back to encountering many spaces that I didn't belong to because people decided that they would exclude me, forced me to build something for myself where I can create the world I want to see and belong in that world, not just work for it or facilitate communication between groups separate from myself,
Yeah, absolutely. You're bringing up, to me, it sounds like you almost like have to do the research a little bit, test it out, try new things. There just has to be a willingness to try. And if someone's listening today and they're like, I don't have a willingness to try, it's like, okay. On the other side of that might be an opportunity, but also, there's a whole variety of reasons that people don't feel like they can go find a place. Mostly, I think what you've shared, which is you've been, asked to leave places or didn't fit in places. Someone said, know your place, right? Who didn't hear that growing up? Actually, I'd love to hear what you have to say about the people. I can't wait to hear your response to this, who are like, know your place. And what that means, really, and how you relate to that phrase.
Yeah, that's a hard one. For me,
Say it again.
As an intersectional person, as a Black person, being told to know your place is its own historical statement. And I heard this statement in school from a white deaf teacher telling me and the class, but specifically talking to me about a question that I asked. about the things that I do in our community and what I love. And that teacher told me that I would need to know my place in the deaf community. And that was hard because for me, for someone else to tell you to know your place means that they have already predetermined where you belong and what you're here for. And that is not what life is, period. Not for me, and I want more people to know that that's not how life goes. You know, that only works if you let someone tell you where you belong, what you should be doing or not. Now, we do have rules and we have laws that exist for government and governance and safety, which makes sense. But I think what's also equally as important is a questioning and a curiosity of those rules that exist. You know, what are they for? Who made those rules? Who do they benefit? Who do they exclude? Do those rules actually apply to everyone in the room, or are they set to keep some people up here in power and to keep some people down here in their place? And it is our responsibility as people in this world to question those rules, always.
I think I was watching your hands in particular, just I've been watching your hands, but, you know, maybe not tracking, but certainly absorbing the movement and absorbing the emphasis. Like there's definitely, if you're not deaf, you don't watch sign language. It's just not something that so I'm appreciating being witness to it. And is this curiosity? How did you do it?
Curiosity. Yeah,
curiosity.
Curious,
Actually
like
touching your throat a little bit.
And it wiggles.
When you did that, it registered, like I felt my heart get warm. Just like just the gesture of it in and of itself. So thank you for that. There's emotions coming up for me. This week's spotlight is on Up Until Now Collective. Up Until Now is a New York City-based artist collective that is committed to inclusive, accessible, and equitable working environments. This collective develops and produces new interdisciplinary work that explores language, empathy, intimacy, and connection, and seeks to challenge the status quo by building new structures for artistic creation. Lots of new there, and I know our listeners love that. So since its inception, UUN has collaborated with over 300 artists. To learn more, visit upuntilnowcollective.com. Oh, what a gift. Now, back to the show. So I want to hear a little bit about the space you're creating with it. And then I want to hear about, if someone's looking to find their place, what questions might they be asking to land on the Up Until Now Collective as a place they might like to be a part of?
We created Up Until Now Collective. The sign is Up Until Now Collective. And we created this space so that people can have a space where intimacy, empathy, and connection live in harmony, in community. We also made this space to bring together people who might not normally meet each other. So, musicians, instrumentalists, singers, dancers, opera, the disability community, blind people, deaf people. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you tend to hang out with each other. Same thing with music. Just because you do and make music doesn't mean that you get to meet a dancer, And so we noticed in our worlds just how successful and how powerful it is to bring people together, and what happens, the magic that happens when you find your place with other people.
How have you seen since it's created? I mean, obviously the whole world's changed since 2020. As you think about like the percentage of time you're investing in an effort, and I know you're fresh off of a one-person show that we'll talk about, but as you think about the mission of the organization and the place it is and how it's evolved since 2020, when everything was on fire, how have you grown with it? How has it grown?
Yeah, our keystone, the space that all of the bridges kind of connect is Kevin. Kevin Newberry, my partner. He is the common thread throughout everything. And he grew up with such an emphasis on empathy and connection and community and intimacy. And I think his spirit has influenced everyone who's touched our work and vice versa, the lives that we've touched. And all of us, I mean, one phrase is all boats rise together. And it's not about a hierarchy of one person in power and the rest have to listen. It is very much a collective effort. And I think that has helped me as a leader, as an artist. I remember when I first met Kevin, I mean, I told you earlier that when I was in San Francisco, I had to make an act, right? And self-produce. And also when you're self-producing, you can tend to be a little bit like, ooh, I don't want anyone to touch my work. I am the person who's controlling it, right? But another idea that we follow is the best idea in the room wins. So it's like if you're in a room with all brilliant minds and everyone is throwing it into the pot, you know, and there's open discussion about what we want to make together, then you can't really go wrong. And you have a lot of fun in the process. And then we also remember and realize that when we make art, it's not just about the end product, but so largely about the process of getting from point A to Z and experiencing all of the gamut, you know, and having fun and having joy while you're doing
God
it.
God forbid, you know?
Right?
I mean, like, I hope as a lot of my clients are in, you know, the Fortune 500 space. And so when you talk about enjoying the process, and, you know, I was just on a Zoom this morning with a client, $6 billion client, right? And that's great. You know, it is so great. And I hope that the culture at the organization continues to be inclusive and let people feel welcome as an employer and as a successful company. But I think, you know, when you get into this, like talking about empathy and talking about places, you belong everywhere, right? And if you are ever made to feel like you don't belong, it's not the right place for you. And then, Brandon, you start talking about like find people who aren't like you, then in my experience, the corporate world gets a little shaky. Then it's like, okay, we're going to lose something here. So I wonder, you know, about you creating Up Until Now Collective, when people are scared about a space being inclusive, how you would articulate like what you really have to gain there, you know, versus the fear of like, this is going to cost a lot of money. This is going to, you know, I'm going to lose something, right?
That is interesting. I mean, I think in my experience in making spaces more inclusive, I have only gained wisdom, gained perspective, gained new friends, new linguistic ideas. And I understand that fear can be a high motivator to avoid change. I see it. Do I feel it myself? No, I have never really. It's my worst nightmare is doing the same thing every day. I don't like it. I've never liked that. More power to the people who like to do that, but just like you said, some people, their worst nightmare is having change every day. It can be stressful.
Yeah.
However, I think in the corporate world, for example, there are summits. There are times when the corporation wants to bring together everyone, and they want to talk about their goals and their mission and what Q1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to look like, and all of those things. And like you mentioned, there's a one-person show that I have, right? And it explains my story, my intersectional identity, and it shows the art that I make and has a performance with dance and acrobatics and sign language and film and subtitles. So it's a way for corporations to be inspired by the art and the creativity that I make, to hear and feel amazing music, and dancing and sign language, and then to gain some perspective on inclusivity and the disability community, the deaf world, sign language, the Black community, what it means to talk about non-binary and trans people, verbiage, the right kinds of ways to talk about things. All of that you get from this one-person show, but you also gain that from inviting someone new into your world. And I like to think of myself as a bridge. So when I'm invited somewhere, I'm happy to be there. But soon you will have more people who have different perspectives and who are from those different communities. And you'll gain even more insight. And then your company itself will be that much better.
Absolutely. I'm thinking you just debuted this one-person show. Congratulations. OMG. What a birth.
Thank you. It was the birth. I know it all happened at the same time, but this one-person show too, I debuted it at NYU at my alma mater.
Yeah.
So it was for the new freshmen who are wide-eyed and bushy-tailed to dive into school and who are so proud of their accomplishment of getting into NYU, right?
Yeah,
and then they get to see what, as an alumnus, what they could become in the future. And it's very exciting. And it was such an honor. There's also the aspect of aerial hoop. So that's one thing that I wanted to do for this performance at Skirball for these youth. But the theater itself couldn't handle the rigging and all of that. But in the one-person show, there's this aspect of circus. And there's such joy in that, and artistic creativity. And there's a costume that, you eventually see as I bring different parts of myself off. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And we need new perspectives. We need to see new stories. We need inspiration. We need to zhuzh up things that might be a little sometimes mundane. And that's why different corporations and different summit meetings call me. So it's an honor to be able to share my story too.
Yeah, the reception at NYU and the debut, how do you feel a few days after it? I mean, I know you want to do it again. You will do it again. You'll do it hundreds of times if you want to. That's my belief. But what was it like? What did people have to say? And how does getting feedback fit into that for you?
Well, the title of this one-person show is called Freedom. And that is how it made me feel. It feels so good to be able to artistically express myself, with content that I know helps people deal with their emotions and deal with life. The feedback was really special. Actually, it was so beautiful. There was one student who, after the show, came up to the stage that I was on and from afar started signing to me and said, "I'm a Goda. My grandparents are deaf. Thank you so much for doing this." And I was like, oh my goodness, that is so special. Like this Goda who got into NYU. Like, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I was the first and only. So I'm like, yes, please, let's exchange information, you know? So,
yeah.
And my teachers, you know, my former teachers got to see and even gave me feedback, and that was really wonderful. And I feel really empowered. Because I've spent the past, I mean, my whole life, 35 years, but the past 10 years really focusing on facilitating communication between deaf people and the hearing world.
Yeah.
And really removing myself from the equation and like letting life happen. But as an artist and as a person whose job it is to actually express myself, I had to choose between kind of only facilitating communication and expressing myself and sharing the knowledge that I've been able to learn over this lifetime, you know?
I do. My experience with that restraint, right? So like it's now at the stage in my life, I am expressing myself and being myself. And if you don't like it, then you move on, right? And it's not, there's no, you know, middle finger thrown up. It just is what it is. It's okay. We don't have to be cruel about it. But the whole premise of this podcast, and we'll end with this, is who's missing from your life? You know, from your dinner table, from your friendship circles, from your boardroom, right? From your leadership team. I hear a lot like, we just can't find the people, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, then listen to this podcast, okay? Because here you go. And I also want to sort of humanize you and ask you the question as we close. There's two. Who's missing from your world? And what are you kind of looking for, or who? And is there anything you want to inspire people to do?
Yeah, I think, you know, starting with who's missing from my life. As I've said throughout this entire beautiful conversation, that I am a fortunate person to have so much intersectionality, right?
Yes.
And there's this Black part of me. There's the deaf part of me. There's the queer part of me. There are many more facets of this diamond of a spirit that I have. Yeah. And it's my responsibility, it's no one else's responsibility to feed those parts of myself, you know? And when I notice that they're missing, when they're lacking, I have to go and refill them. And I encourage everyone to analyze themselves and open up and take a look at the diamond that is you, and check out those facets and understand what needs, how do they get fulfilled? And, you know, do they deserve a little bit of shining? And put yourself in those places. It's not anyone else's responsibility but yours to find the time to shine your spirit. You know, with Up Until Now Collective, we are working so hard to make art that we see is missing in this world, and tell stories that are missing and that have been missing. And we need support with that. So you can visit our website at upuntilnowcollective.com, and you can sign up to the newsletter. You can research the work that we've done. If you can help in any capacity, in any way, we would love that, because it does take a village, and all we do is bring in people who have a strong spirit, a strong heart, and who want to make change in this world. And we would love to get to know you.
Beautiful. Brandon, I'll just say this. Right before I got on here, I had to do some stretching. It's my afternoon dip. The energy. It just is what it is. The moment I saw your face, and Kevin said you're going to be a star. I mean, I don't know. I hope if you want that you become a star. I think you are already. But I just have to thank you for being so willing to share you and your story with me. We don't know each other. And I want it to be an inspiration to other people that, like, just because you don't know someone doesn't mean you can't get to know them, So thank you for taking time on your homecoming day with your beloved. Are you kidding me?
Well, thank you, Emily. It's been really wonderful to get to know you, and you're such a great interviewer, and that's one thing that Kevin and I love about each other is that the lives that we live keep on going, and any positivity, anything that is great, bring it on, and we are here for it. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to hear it and see it. Thank you for filming. Important. I think you'll be really happy with the idea.
I think so too. Thank you, friend. I send you forth to have a wonderful evening together.
Thank you.
That was Brandon. I told you they were inspiring. If you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe. If you loved it, don't forget to leave us a review. And even if you have feedback, let us know. We are open. This is the last episode of the season, but we're still going to be posting on good old Instagram and TikTok. So check us out at Who's Missing Podcast. See you there, friends.